You are not a box. So don't put life in a box. Don't put your relationship in a box. Don't put your finances in a box. Don't put your story in your box. Okay. You want to make sure that when you think about life, when you think about all that you have, okay, all that you desire, especially because the objective of life is to go along this path of life, right? And essentially get to a destination of what we will call happiness, right? Or for most people, we would say success. Here is where you are now. Now, the issue with getting from here to here is not the journey itself. It's how you think about the journey. Okay. How you think about yourself, how you think about you and, let's say, the universe, or even God, or let's say your culture, your community. Okay. All of these walls around here, around what you think, is what's blocking you and preventing you from going along the path of your success, whatever that looks like to you. And so, really, the message here today is going to be pretty straightforward. But I really want you to understand that whatever you think of oneself, whatever you think as yourself as an individual, whatever you think as yourself as it relates to the universe, the what you may perceive to be the outside world or reality, is essentially all of the blocks that's preventing you, right, from stepping out of your current circumstance, your current way of living, your current reality, to actually become the person who achieves the success that you desire. Now, when we talk about you and the universe, even in me making that statement, it appears that you and the universe, right? It appears that it's two separate things. But really, what we're talking about is a difference in degree, not a difference in essence. Okay. It's almost like degrees as far as temperature, degrees as far as slight direction. You want to understand that you are not separate from the universe. You are an expression of the universe. You are a degree by which the universe is experiencing and expressing itself. So you and the universe are actually one. So, as this relates to your desires are actually the universe's desires. Okay. So do not think for a second, even though I get it, we do that. We tend to think that our desires, because the journey toward our desires seems difficult because we are going into the realm of breaking free from a identity to stepping into a new identity. We are going from breaking free from this idea of you to this truth of the universe. You see, the idea of you is backed by what you call ego. That is the thing that gives you this strong sense of identity. Okay. And your ego really is attached to this identity. It's part of the problem. Now, the ego isn't wrong. It isn't bad. It isn't evil. Having an identity is not wrong, bad, or evil. It's about a ratio. It's about a balance. It's about a balance between consciousness and ego. Okay. Just like life is a balance of, one can say, good and evil, light and dark, cold and hot, up and down, left and right, sun and the moon, right? The ocean and the desert, right? We're talking about contrasts. The universe consists of contrast. That is the balance, okay, of this universe, of this reality, of you. So you have to understand you are the universe. Your desires are the universe's desires. When you identify too much with ego, you tend to create this separation. Okay. Kind of looks like this again, right? There's a separation between this and that. But in truth, it is oneness. It is the same. When you master your ego by way of consciousness, then you break free of, right, this illusion. Okay. You still see it, you still experience it, but it is an illusion. But you break free of it through it and recognize your truth that you are one with the universe. Now, how does this pertain to your desires? Whether it be money, whether it be love, whether it be just simply a feeling of euphoria, happiness, joy, a freedom, true spiritual freedom. If that is your desire, that is easily obtainable, right? Now, easily, again, in itself represents what I'm going to address here. Because this language, the things that we talk about, really comes down to right limitations or limiting beliefs. Now, here's the thing. The idea of a limiting belief is very important to recognize as something that it is progressive, meaning that it doesn't stay the same. So just like when you are going from moment to moment, from one self to another, right? Every second, millisecond, every fractionable possible moment, and even smaller, you are shifting from one version of self to another. As you are shifting from one version of yourself to another, your ideas about self shift as well. You just simply don't really feel it. You don't notice it because you're not really practicing and being aware of what's happening. But it's a fundamental truth. Change is fundamental. Even when you think you aren't changing, you are absolutely changing. So when we think about what you can do, what you desire, what you cannot do, all of those things are changing from moment to moment. When you're aware of this change, then you can, in fact, speed up the momentum of this change. You can recognize, right, the beauty in breaking and expanding your limitations. So it's not really about making limitations stronger. It's just that your ideas of your limits, you become stronger, right? And so as you begin to, let's say we're going to do these circles again, right? Now, the circle in itself, inside of the circle represents your infinite self, your divine self. The outside, the circle that you see and recognize, that is a representation of a limiting beliefs, right? A limitation. You can also define it as your physical body. That is also a limit, right? Because there's only but so many things you can do with the physical body. So as you progress from frame to frame, your ideas, your thoughts, your emotions, your understandings, your reality, okay, begins to expand and grow from the inside. And that is forcing these limitations, right, to actually, they still exist, but they exist in a very harmonious space, right? They exist in a very positive space. Eventually, when we break free from these limitations, we break free from our physical bodies, we break free from this physical world, and we step into the absolute, right? The absolute truth of the universe. But what I want you to understand is that in order for you to begin actually attracting, creating, manifesting your desires, you have to purposely push the boundaries. You have to push your perspective on these limitations, right? So, a limitation, for example, is saying, you know what, I want to make $100,000, right? So, you say you want to make $100,000, okay? Though this is probably more than you've ever made before, the reality is, though this is good, it is still a limit, right? Because you are limiting your potential to $100,000. Once you achieve the $100,000, then you say, you know what? Now I want to go to, let's say, $200,000. Okay, great. You're going to double it. Still, that is a limit. Then you're going to say, you know what? 300,000, 400,000, and eventually you're going to go to the classic big old 1 milli, right? $1 million. Though that is way more than you need, right? That is still a limit to what you truly can make, right? The reality is there is no limit to what you are and what you can create. But it is important to recognize, see this contrast, right? You are infinite, but in order for you to acknowledge that infinite beingness, right, that infinite truth, reality, you still have to identify limits, okay? You have to identify benchmarks, destinations, right? You have to understand that they need each other. That's what this world is about. That's the conflict that many of us have, especially on a conscious spiritual journey, is we get so above the physical world that we don't think practicality and using logic, right, is something that goes hand in hand with spirituality, but it does. It has to. Okay. So remember, don't be fixated on your limitations. Okay. They will exist. They will always exist. But you want to make sure that your limitations are first being led by, okay, your infinite beingness. So we want to make sure that when we think about this contrast of the universe, okay, the one thing we tend to run away from and don't want to experience is, say, the negative aspects of that contrast. Though we have to acknowledge that, because without the negative, we cannot and will not understand and appreciate the positive. And so when it comes to your limitations, what I want you to understand is you have to recognize the finite, okay, in order for you to practice and embrace the infinite. So the limitations serve a purpose, but it's important not to get fixated on that. And don't identify with the finite. Identify with the infinite. When you identify with the infinite, that will, right, expand the finite, just like it has here. It will continue to expand. You will continue to grow. You will continue to expand, grow, grow, grow. This is why even the most spiritual of avatars and teachers and gurus still continue their practices. They still continue to meditate. They still continue to self-reflect, to think things through, to be in the practice of, okay? Because there is an infinite progression along this journey. So what I want you to understand is the limitations that you have right now, that you're experiencing right now, the only way that you are going to break free of those limitations is to go within, to go into the infinite aspects of who you are. When you get into the infinite aspects of who you are, the finite will expand and make room for you. Okay. But if you identify with the finite, then that basically makes it creates a block. It creates some resistance for your infinite beingness to actually expand and grow. So you want to make sure. Now, the thing is, you can't really do that to the infinite beingness, but what it will create for you is this sense of suffering, right? Pain, depression, right? Because you're not living up to your true self. It's almost like saying that, somebody who isn't on somebody isn't on a spiritual journey. There is no such thing. It's like somebody saying this is spiritual and that isn't spiritual. There is no such thing. All things are spiritual. All people are on the spiritual journey. It's just a matter of if they're conscious of it or not. When you are conscious of it, the expansion grows exponentially. Okay. And then you can build a momentum with that expansion. And then those quote unquote limitations that are created by the ego, you recognize are an illusion. Okay. And therefore, to a degree, they cease to exist. So when you think about your money situation, just continue focusing on the expansion of that money. Continue focusing on the embodiment of expanding your consciousness about money, how you think about money, how you feel about money, what you do with the money, the management of money. When you think about love, same thing. Think about expanding your consciousness on how you are in love with somebody. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What are your practices? What are your rituals? Okay. When you think about your health, these are all things that you desire for your future self. And these are all things that your future self is constantly sending to you as far as messages. It is sending a message to you, to your present self, okay, saying, hey, these are the things that you should be doing to align and expand your consciousness to essentially get to the frequency of the future self. So limitations are something that we have to face, okay? We have to face them. And when we face them, it isn't with the intention of succumbing to them, surrendering to them, acting like they're always going to be there and that's where everything ends. It's actually where things begin. You just have to understand how to break through those limitations, to expand on your consciousness, your infinite beingness, to challenge, right, your limitations by way of learning, growing, keeping an open mind about what it is that you desire. Your desires are the keys, right? They are the little blueprints, the breadcrumbs, okay? When you follow each one of these breadcrumbs, ideas, goals, curiosities, desires, they force you to expand, okay? They force you essentially. I mean, force may not be the best word, but they force your ego, that's for sure, to expand, to grow, to accept, to appreciate, to embrace your true self. And eventually, you become so big, you take over this whole board. You become so big, this board represents the universe. You become and recognize your oneness with the universe. You become one with the universe. Okay? So when we get into limitations, recognize that limitations are just simply, right, the other side of the coin. When I think about a coin, and I thought about this a long time ago when people say, oh, how do you deal with feeling sad or depressed or, upset or melancholy or what have you? Well, if you recognize that the connection between that feeling of negativity is just simply the other side, right, of reality. It's the other side, the other side of the spectrum of emotions. Then you realize that on the other side of that is happiness, joy, all the things that you desire. So I think about it as a coin, meaning that it's literally right around the other side of the edge. And if we can remember that your emotions, especially depression, anger, feeling sad, when you recognize that that exists to give you an appreciation, give you a true contrast, context as to what happiness and joy feels is, then you actually learn to appreciate the sadness. You learn to appreciate those emotions that we often say are bad. But without them, we wouldn't know the good. Therefore, that means that the bad is actually good. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Again, if we are not experiencing the bad, the quote unquote limitations, then we will not know the good. Okay? If we don't know sadness, we are not understanding and appreciating happiness. Therefore, without sadness, happiness won't exist, which means that sadness in itself indirectly is actually a good thing. Okay? The issue is if you're stuck in a space of sadness for long, long periods of time, then okay, that's another conversation. But ultimately, if you feeling those emotions, right, and you feel normal, it's okay. You're going to feel that. Even when things are completely fine and perfect, there are going to be moments where the emotions just simply need to materialize and manifest as sadness, as melancholy, as chill, as blah. That doesn't mean something is wrong. That just means you're having a human experience. And then you just take that, be with it, and then understand it as just a simple flip of the coin. There is joy, there is happiness, there is bliss. Then you take that, bring it back to where you currently are, then that begins to transform. It begins to shift. The sadness, the blah becomes relaxation. It becomes tranquility, it becomes peace. Okay? So I just had the inspiration to just share that thought, was not prepared. I just heard limitation and I felt like that's the topic I needed to share with you today. So I hope that reached you today. I hope that you was dealing with that topic and you said, you know what, this is exactly what I needed. So this is for you. Okay. Feel free to go to futureselffrequency.com, pick up the book and the journal that's going to support you to align with the version of you that has it all, because it's there. That version of you is there waiting for you. So let's bridge the gap between the now and the future, collapse time by using the practices and principles here, and let's create the world, the universe that we know exists for you. Peace and abundance always.